My never I say ma PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV there. I see them yopo.
Yes, it's working again. And yeah, Mahama Vice President. Sure, Professor Jane Naana Obokwajima. First woman, first female Vice President. Hey, the future is bright, oh.
First female.
Me, I can see it, oh. I heard the president in China that one day there will be a female president in Ghana. That day will soon come, sooner than later. If you read Animal Farm, Snowball will tell you that day must surely come. And sooner than later, Mugabe, yes, raise your head and see it. You people said she was not well and she was old. You're lying.
Because
she was ill. She was taken ill and she went for medical treatment. And when she did that, she's back and fit. Last 2 weeks, Okodiasa, I was not sorry. Okodiasa, I was not sorry. Last 2 weeks. And I went get a video, and tell me that she's sick. Sure. And you'll be a professor. What in a classroom? Mimpo 1 year porch, and I'm the thing I may be into me no. And you said me job and no, Daddy. Mimpo 1 year into a chair of mine 4 years. Daddy went to me and the class. No, me ball lecture. Yes, I make lecture on ye be utiabon our bone. It's a new American. It's Professor Jane Naana Obokwajima. Affirmative action continue. Alistair Taro as I sit here. Media, we wish you a pomudi kesiye, good health and good strength and brighter wisdom as you speak. Okakoko sector 1 Oma will say gumi. Just say you understand all the sectors with ease. That is why it's not easy. This is the first time a woman heads the economic management team. Yes, and I'm telling you, yes, they will manage the micro and still manage the macro at the same time. Onim sika ebefa ebeko jomwa ebetumi die aduane table, so we will not be extravagant. She knows how to cut her coat according to the pattern and design of the cloth. That is why we are where we are, and we'll continue to promote her works and all that. Mugabe,
Ghana what I
reports it, and also the president, when he was giving a speech at the Global Leaders Forum on Women, made some comments about the fact that soon Ghana would have a female president. And people have given it all kinds of interpretations, Some have actually even suggested that the president is backing his vice president to succeed him. Someone say no, that's not it. I don't know whether. So perhaps let's start from that softer political side, and then we can come to the real hardcore.
Well, I think the facts are very clear. If President Mahama has an assessment of Professor Jane Naana Obokwajima, it's not about 9 months. President Mahama worked with her as Minister of Education for some time. Her record as the first female vice chancellor, at the University of Ghana is also public record. Her distinction as an academic and a researcher and so on is also a matter of public record. So all of these are available not just to President Mahama, but to any and everybody who wants to assess, her capabilities. So it's not about 9 months. I think we should take that out.
I was looking at the governance as a vice president, but that's fine. I think
but all of these things are out there for us to look
that's
at,
correct.
Now, beyond that, it is also significant that the president did not specifically mention her, and that those who are mentioning her as the president's choice are engaged in some kind of speculation. You understand? It may well be that the president had her in mind when he spoke, but he didn't mention her. What the president simply said was that Ghana is developing to the extent that women are breaking what he calls the glass ceiling, and made references to significant opportunities offered to women in government, in the security services, in education, and so on, for women to excel. And I'm happy that anybody will be doing that. Women constitute more than 50% of the Ghanaian population. And any attempt to keep them in the background, to deny them, the right of participation in any aspect of the national life, is silly. You understand what I mean? Because you're denying more than half your population an opportunity to contribute to your development, and it doesn't make any sense at all. So that's the context within which the president spoke. Now, having said that, look at all the people, characters, and so on, who want to be president in Ghana. Look at them, all of them. They may be coming from CPP, they may be coming from MPP, they may be all kinds of people in the NDC and so on. If you look at all the array of people and so on, is Professor Naana not qualified to become president? Look at the people who are offering themselves. So what is the big deal? What is the problem? What's the big deal? I don't see it. The big.
Anyway, Kwesi.
Yeah, I mean, look, the president went to China to attend a conference on women empowerment. I think that was the primary reason for him going to China. And whilst in China, he has engaged with the Chinese authorities, including the president, to discuss economic and trade relations. You understand? The details are emerging, and it is obvious that the Belt and Road Initiative is one of the options that we are looking at. It's also obvious that we are looking at the offer of zero tariffs for a number of African countries, including Ghana. So concretely, there are things on the table. Now, my brother here suggests that we are not taking advantage of the one district, one factory program. And whatever was on offer then in order to improve the trade and economic relations with China. I would have been happier if he had told us what those opportunities specifically are. Because I've had a lot of difficulty with this one district, one factory project.
Why?
He knows, and you do know. I go to Tamale and I see a motor king assembly plant which existed 25 years earlier, listed as 1D1F. That's fraudulent, isn't it?
No, so
No, but Kwesi.
That's clearly fraudulent, isn't it?
The NPP's manifesto was also clear. The NPP's manifesto didn't talk about starting a company from the ground.
it's a
said
combination of.
they will support existing businesses.
That is correct.
And that
rope
includes
them
a motor
into-
king assembly
Yes,
plant,
yes.
which had existed in Tamale 20
Yes.
years before the government
Yes.
came into
But
power.
needed,
Okay, that's
needed
fine.
assistance to
How
to
do
grow.
you incorporate that into the current discussions with the Chinese government?
No, my
Show me how
conversation.
you are going to incorporate that
No.
in the current discussions with the
Uncle
Chinese
Kwesi,
government.
Can't we produce motor and export it to China?
Uncle Kwesi,
Can't we produce motor and export
Uncle Kwesi,
to Ghana?
Uncle Kwesi,
Produce motor king in
Uncle
Ghana
Kwesi,
and export to China.
Uncle
More,
Kwesi.
more be a little serious.
Uncle Kwesi, my
Please stop the joke.
Uncle Kwesi, my
Motor king,
No,
which
that's
is
just
made
no,
in
that's just
China.
my mind. That's just my mind.
Uncle Kwesi, my comment on the
What
1D1F.
is this?
My comment on the 1D1F was not connected to trade with China.
Okay.
It was in the context of creating opportunities, building industries and companies that will be able to provide the needed export
No,
to either AFTA, which is our African trading partners, and outside Africa.
yes.
So in that light,
so you're saying the same thing.
no.
Because I think the matter had to do with what can we produce.
No, but we are looking beyond China.
What
Yes.
advantages do we have in our
But-
economic
Yes, so
and
that's
trade
when-
relations
so that's
with
when the
China?
1D,
That's
1F
a-
matter came up.
That's a legitimate question to ask.
Yes.
But when you bring it down to one district, one factory level, we are going
No,
to
but
create a
that
lot
is
of
where
problems.
you
So
also
are
building
going to
your
create a lot-
industrialization. We need to have a national policy.
Assembling motor king
But it
bicycles
goes
in
beyond
Tamale.
it. Uncle Kwesi, are you saying that you've not seen other companies built under 1D1F that manufactures and exports?
Mention them, we are here. If you mention
I should
them,
mention the names of the
if you
companies.
mention them, I will accept. Mention them.
No, but this is a statement of fact. I'm surprised you say that the 1D1.
I'm not saying that is not a statement of fact.
So
I'm
why
saying
should
that
I?
You know.
But
So
you
tell
also
me.
know You also know several
Now you're not
companies.
telling me anything. You're complaining.
Uncle Kwesi.
Master, I beg.
Uncle Kwesi. Uncle Kwesi.
Oh my God.
So it's all, and these are some of the things we need to be mindful as a country, that when companies or governments create opportunities for us to build our industrialization base, and to make sure that, because our economy thrives on export, not just import. And so any opportunity, if you check those in the manufacturing of sanitary ware, go and check the companies that are producing sanitary ware and exporting out of this jurisdiction. Look at companies that have taken advantage of our agro industry and are exporting out of this country. And so you look at what businesses see outside the country, and then we take advantage of, build those capacities, provide government enabling environment so that those places will thrive.
Okay.
And the same way with this zero tariff, government, and that's where I'm coming from, government should be able to clearly know how are they positioning the country to take advantage of. And you mentioned that if currently our trade with China, our export to China constitutes just 11%, and China is exporting up to 45%. Are we saying that there's nothing that government can do in terms of setting the framework or the environment for Ghanaians to take advantage of producing things that are marketable and that can be exported into China? And that is what we need to be discussing.
But that's exactly what the conversations are about. Why? I just read the report in which the president is saying that the loose ends will be tied by the end of October. You read it?
Yes.
And that they are discussing these matters. These are the matters on the table. It's not like they're not on the table. There are matters on the table receiving attention, being discussed very seriously. Okay? So far, China is the only country in the world which is offering Africa, not just Ghana, zero tariffs. Zero tariffs. And it's something that we should be interested in. So far, throughout the world, China is the only country which is offering us the Belt and Road Initiative. No other country anywhere, no development bank is offering us that opportunity and so on. So let's discuss, let's come up with concrete proposals which would help us to improve trade and economic relations between Ghana and China. Finish. That's all. Unless we have some fundamental ideological or political problem with China, this, as far as I'm concerned, is a very fine opportunity.
Okay.
And I'm so very happy that the president is taking advantage of this opportunity and helping to set the pace, for improvement in economic and commercial relations with China.
And Opoku worries. Do you think this is the solution, the panacea to solve the problem? Perceived grade B, take it to grade A. Perceived grade C, take it to grade B.
Well, I think what we ought to aim at is to build schools with uniform standards throughout the country and for everybody. Understand? And
which was a vision of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, wasn't it?
Of course. And then also not just that, you would recall that the last government, and I'm talking about the Akufo-Addo government, sought to limit the influence of parent-teacher associations in the development of the schools. Now, the rationale then was that some of these schools, because of their very nature and so on, have parents and guardians who are better endowed than the other schools. And these parents are able to pump in a lot of resources for the development of the schools, way above what other parents in other schools can do. And I thought that that was a sensible, good policy. The standard of education, the standard of our schools should not be dictated by the capacity of guardians and parents. Because it's the only way of ensuring that there is a certain level of uniformity and so on. But having said that, it is also not true that these so-called special schools or advanced schools produce the best students. It's not true. I mean, there's statistics to suggest that people have been to less privileged schools and they've excelled in science and mathematics and other subjects. And all of us do know that if you walk the streets of Accra, for example, you find drug addicts and so on who came from these so-called privileged schools.
Right.
Indeed, if you come to the lower levels, it's very shocking. I've noticed a certain trend where those who go to local authority schools and so on, I mean, tend to make a decent life, construct a decent life for themselves. Whereas a lot of the children who go to international schools and so on end up as drug addicts and waywards and so on. And you know that, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who insists that his children should go to certain schools, and I drew his attention to this problem, and we had a long conversation. The exposure to drugs, the exposure to certain lifestyle for students and so on, it's heavy in certain types of schools and so on. But ideally, all of us as citizens of the same country ought to have the same right to education, which means that there ought to be equality of opportunity and there ought to be equality of standards and so on. So that's what we should be working at. I'm not so sure that what the minister is prescribing is the way out, that every now and then you upgrade a few to join the elite and so on. I don't think that solves the problem, really.
Why do you think it won't solve the problem?
Because there are still elite schools and non-elite schools. The whole effort should be aimed at eliminating elitism. You understand? Completely. And making education accessible to everybody, making the quality of education, developing a certain parity of quality across the country. That should be the objective. Of course, it takes resources. And I don't think that the Ghanaian economy is out of the woods yet. So another challenge is how do you generate the necessary resources in order to equalize access and equalize standards. That's a challenge that all of us need to address.
I recall, I hope my memories will serve me right, but I think that Dr. Osei Duchum.
That was where I was coming to.
Yes, I think he started a project where headmasters were taken from the so-called elite, very successful schools and posted to schools that were not doing too well so that they can go and impose or sort of, they can use the same model that has worked for where they are, and seek to sort of use that to improve.
It's not a model, it's a question of resources.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a question of resources, not a question of model.
No, but it's also a question of capacity, Kwesi. You can have all the resources.
Comes down basic to resources, availability of resources.
Now, so if the resources are not born,
if you are taking, and I was going to mention the school, but I'm not going to do that. If you're taking to school B, the school has no bus. The school doesn't have anything that you can call a science lab. It has dormitories with windows broken, no beds, and so on. Teacher bungalows are dilapidated and so on. What model are you going to take there to change things if you don't have the resources? It boils down to resource allocation.
No, obviously, I don't dispute that.
To capacity to generate resource and so on. You understand? Why? Achimota School is more likely to generate a lot more resources than some school that I know in some village. Why? Because of this system of old boyism and old girlism and so on, which enables, past students to contribute to building the school and so on. And you do know that in the most endowed schools, that is where you find the parliamentarians coming from. That's where you find the big businessmen coming from. That is where you find the big politicians coming from and so on. So there's a certain capacity to mobilize resources beyond what government is able to provide through budgetary allocations.
Right.
You understand? So at the end of the day, you have a lopsided, situation. And it's largely resources.
Resources.
You know. Why? The headmasters, they have the same education. The headmasters have the same qualifications. In fact, you may find some headmasters in less privileged schools who are better qualified than headmasters in more privileged schools.
True.
Okay? The only difference is the availability of resources.
Okay. So you're talking about the importance of the e-blocks that was started by the Etoile government.
If you move from the Nkrumah era, one of the other attempts, bold and courageous attempts to equalize, the standard of education and so on, was the e-blocks project, which was started under the Mahama administration. So it doesn't matter where you are. If you go to the north and it's an e-block, it's an e-block. Yeah. And it looks the same as an e-block in the south, and so on. So that was a bold attempt at standardization, and I think that is the way to go. The way to go is to standardize. The way to go is to make sure that all schools have the same facilities, to achieve a certain level of equality in the standard of education and so on, It also has to do with the personnel that you have, not just the teaching personnel, also municipals and so on. And usually, the best personnel are attracted to schools which have decent bungalows and so on. So if you're building a school, again, standardization ought to look at the facilities available to teaching staff, teaching and non-teaching staff. That adds as an incentive and so on. These are the things that we need to look at. But as I've said, all of this will require huge resources. Question is, do we have the resources? And if we don't have the resources, how do we mobilize the resources? And one of the ways of mobilizing resources is to take resources from some places and put it where they are most needed or where they make the most impact. And there are so many things that we do, which, as far as I'm concerned, should not be considered as national priority. I mean, this attempt to freeze purchases of luxury cars for government officials and so on, I think it's a sensible attempt if we do it well. Mm-hmm. The attempt to reduce the number of government employees, especially at the ministerial level and so on, I think is a sensible thing which should be encouraged, So there are a number of things that we can do in order to get some resources which we can then put into education, which eventually benefits all the sectors of national life and eventually leads to the improvement of the quality of citizenship and so on. So these are things we can look at from time to time,
Dedi kama mamena PENDREAM TV ase. Now so far so good. Say open online portal e wo Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, PENDREAM TV.